Station pilots are very essential. They're shunting engines that keep the yards organized and help arrange trains for waiting engines. Almost every station has a pilot. Philip keeps things organized at Knapford. While they aren't out of a branch line, Edward and Boko takes turns piloting at Wellsworth. Samson is in charge of Barrow on the mainland, or so he thinks. Vickerstown has 3 pilots, 2 strange diesel shunters, and of course, Rosie, the lavender engine. Rosie cheerfully works harder than any shunter in the yard, keeping things neat as a pin, and making sure all the trains ran right on time. Early one morning at Vickerstown, Rosie was arranging the first trains for the day. The sun had barely risen to greet the new day, and the station was peaceful and quiet. But it wasn't quiet for long. Henry lumbered in loudly and sluggishly. He was returning from the mainland after pulling the flying kipper.
Good morning, Henry!
Please, Rosie. Can't you be cheerful later in the day? I've had a very long night.
Oh dear. You look exhausted, Henry. Why don't you rest in the yard for a while?
I can't rest. I'm pulling the express today. If I'm not there to collect it, James gets it.
Henry, if you're too tired to even make it to the station, how do you expect to be able to pull another train?
But, I need to.
You need to get some sleep. Now park your tender in the shed now. Or I'm telling Emily.
Emily? Fine. I'll rest in the yard, but I won't like it.
Despite his protests, Henry quickly fell asleep as soon as he backed into the shed. When he opened his eyes, the sun was high in the sky, smiling down on him. Henry was smiling too, after some well-deserved sleep.
Afternoon, sleepyhead. Feeling better?
A little. Sorry if I was so cross, Rosie. I didn't want to let Sir Topham Hatt down, or Miss James looking disappointed when I took the express from him.
That's alright, Henry. Even you need to rest every now and then. That's why I advocated for you.
Advocate? What does that mean?
It means that I told Sir Topham Hatt needed a rest and he agreed.
You mean like how you advocated for yourself when you worked on the mainland, Rosie?
Exactly like that, Bruno.
You worked on the mainland, Rosie? When was that?
A long time ago, Henry. And before that, I worked even further away than that. Would you like to hear that story?
Oh yes, please! It's one of my favorites! Well, that and the one about the frog and toad.
Well, since you've made me rest today, I think I have time.
Rosie chuckled, and this was the story she told. Before coming to the mainland, Rosie worked as a dockyard shunter on a far-off railway, or railroad as they called it there. Bruno worked alongside her. Back then, he wasn't even a brake van. He was something called a caboose. Together, they kept things running smoothly around the docks and shunting yards. One day, Rosie's manager had exciting news. He was sending her to another dockyard far away. They needed another shunter, and Rosie was the perfect choice. Rosie felt honored, but Bruno was sad. If you're not here with me, who will help me when my head gets too busy?
It'll be okay, Bruno. The workmen will look after you. And if you ever feel ill, just keep reciting the train schedules, or look out to the bay. And remember what I told you about when someone leaves?
You said they don't really go away forever.
Exactly. We'll be together again someday.
Bruno wasn't sure when someday would be, but he still felt a little sad, thinking that he would never see his best friend ever again. Of course, I've been wrong before. Rosie laughed before continuing the story. After a long time traveling across the ocean, Rosie arrived at her new home, with a new coat of paint and a bright smile on her smoke box. As she explored the new docks, she found 3 other engines, 2 more tank engines, and and a large tender engine.
Hello, I'm Rosie, and I'm here to help.
The tank engines weren't impressed. Look at this, Pug! The little lady thinks we need help. What a lark, Ginity. We're the best shunters around here. She'll just get in the way. The big engine was more polite. Don't mind Ginity and Pug, miss. They like to talk tough and pretend they know best.
Well, are they really the best shunters around?
I don't know about the best, but they're certainly the loudest. Just pay them no mind and do your best, and you'll be just fine.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name.
That's because I didn't throw it. My name's Barry. Wait, Barry? As in, Barry the rescue engine?
Yes, that Barry.
Henry remembered Emily's story about Barry. It did not have a happy ending. There was a moment of silence. After a few minutes, Rosie took a deep puff and continued her story. For many years, things ran smoothly at the docks. Rosie made short work of the trucks and ensured that everything was as neat as a pin. Ginity and Pug were secretly impressed, but also a little jealous. They continued acting rude to Rosie, but started making more mistakes in their work.
Bloody hell! Oh, merde.
Their teasing and bad attitudes made Rosie feel sad. But it also made her more thankful to have Barry for a friend. Things were peaceful in the yards for a while. But one day, everything changed. Barry had been caught in a massive explosion, saving everyone from a fire. No one was hurt, but poor Barry was in a sorry state and had to be taken away. Why am I in this? Shut up, Diesel. No one knew when he'd be coming back, or if he would be. The 3 tank engines were miserable without Barry. Unfortunately, it didn't take long for misery to become anger. It was your fault, Ginity! Those were your stupid tankers that exploded! My fault? You shunted them in the wrong place, Pug! I bet you started the fire too! Me? You were the one who took on bad coal that day!
Shut up! Both of you! What happened to Barry was neither of your faults. Blaming each other isn't going to bring him back.
Hey, she's right, Pug. Yeah, it wasn't our fault, Ginity. It was yours, Rosie!
Mine? Why would it be?
You're supposed to be the best shunter here. Why didn't you make sure everything was safe that day?
I tried, but
You always thought you were better than us. I bet you thought you were better than Barry, too. So you blew him up on purpose.
What? I would never!
Well, you know what? You're on your own from here on out. Before Rosie could defend herself, Ginity and Pug huffed away to another part of the yard, leaving Rosie all alone and feeling even more miserable.
What did they mean by that?
Already, she knew she wouldn't like the answer. She found out next morning. Ginity and Pug sulked in their shed, refusing to work. When Rosie told them to come out, they just sniffed and ignored her. Come along, Rosie. If those 2 brats want to laze about, let them. We have work to do. So, reluctantly, Rosie set to work. Murderer! With Ginity and Pug out of the way, Rosie had to manage alone, keeping the docks in order. She did her best, but the workload was too much. No sooner had she finished arranging 1 train than she found herself shunting 3 or more at the same time. Cargo lay on the quay, ships and passengers were delayed, and Rosie heard every single complaint. Some of the people and engines were understanding, others not so much. It's about time
you lazy little teen kettle! Rosie worked so hard, she found herself at the water tower 4 to 5 times a day to refill her tank. A worker noticed this.
That's the 4th drink you've had today, Rosie. Either you've been working too hard, or you had a very leaky tank.
Was it really her 4th? Rosie was so tired that she lost count, and she was too tired to shed a tear. Things went on like this for days, until one early evening. I think I might be lost. Is this Barrow and Furnace? Barrow? Heh, you're about as lost as you can get, buddy. Curious, Rosie decided to investigate the voices. As Rosie backed into the yard, she found Ginity and Pug talking to a visitor. The visitor was a blue tank engine with 6 small wheels, a short stumpy funnel, a short stumpy boiler, and a short stumpy dome. Of course, we all know who it was, don't we? So, you're from the island of Sodor. What are you doing all the way out here? Well, we were visiting a big city on the mainland. We were on our way home with the other engines, but...
Oh dear, Thomas thought it was wise to take a shortcut to get home before James. We told him he should have stayed with the group. Silly Thomas. Clever us.
Anyway, do you know how to get back to Vickerstown from here? Sure. Just go south and take a left on the loop line, and... Ha! Don't be stupid. You take a right at the loop line. No, you take a left. I know my way around here. You couldn't find water in a duck pond! Before anyone could stop them, Ginity and Pug were arguing again. Sometime today would be nice.
Actually, if you reverse back to the junction, there's a set of points leading you to Barrow. Then you just take a right under the road bridge, and...
Oi! Who told you to put your funnel in here, Rosie? Mind your own business!
Actually, I do believe she's right. I remember seeing a junction near Barrow when we first went past it. I remember seeing it too.
Well, that's good enough for me. Thank you for your help, miss. For the first time in days, Rosie offered a small smile. It's easy to see who the smart one is around here. Hey, I knew there was a junction at Barrow. So do I. If you knew, then why didn't you say so in the first place, geniuses? Rosie, Annie, and Clarabelle snickered. Because Rosie distracted us by being annoying. She's just a know-it-all who can't do anything right. Better to know it all than to know nothing. With that, Ginity and Pug hurried away to sulk in another shed.
Such a horrid pair of engines. Indeed. I don't like the mainland, Thomas. Let's leave before we catch their vulgarness.
Thomas wasn't listening. He was looking at Rosie. The poor engine was nearly in tears. Hey, Rosie. Are you alright?
No, I'm not okay. I haven't been okay since I came to these stupid docks.
With that, she told the 3 everything. How she left her railroad behind, how Ginity and Pug had been rude to her, and what happened to Barry. Thomas and the coaches were horrified. And at last, Rosie found her tears.
All I wanted to do was help out and be really useful. But maybe I am only good at making things worse. I don't want to be here anymore. I want to go home.
Thomas's heart sank as Rosie sobbed her heart out. He patiently waited until she calmed down. I know how you feel, but if you give up now, you only give those 2 jerks what they want. And you don't want that, do you?
No. I just want them to start pulling their own weight around here. I might have a solution, dear. If they're going to behave like children, then it's time you treated them like children and go over their heads. Gah!
Go over their heads? Like an airplane? Annie and Clarabelle laughed and explained what that meant. Thomas grinned deviously.
I don't know. I don't want to cause any more trouble.
You? If anyone's caused trouble around here, it's those two layabouts. You don't deserve to be treated like this.
Just hang in there, Rosie. Things will get better. You wait and see.
With that, Thomas and the coaches peeped goodbye and made their way home. As they left, Rosie couldn't help watching them. In her boiler, she felt a bit of warmth that hadn't been there since Barry left. Right there, right then, she had grown a deep respect for Thomas the Tank Engine.
Ah, so that's how it happened, is it?
Rosie didn't reply, but her deep blush did all the talking for her.
How? What happened? Never mind, Bruno. Still, what horrid little pipsqueaks those two engines were. If only I could give them a piece of my mind.
Oh, don't worry about them, Henry. Ginny and Pug learned a lesson they'll never forget.
Rosie smirked as she continued the story. Next morning, Ginny and Pug were dozing in their shed, as usual, looking forward to another day of making Rosie do all their work. However, their peaceful sleep was rudely interrupted by a very cross Rosie.
Ugh, keep it down, wife ruiner. We're trying to sleep.
Not this time, Lazy Bones. The docks are a mess, and I can't do it alone. So start showing a wheel.
If you can't keep up, that's your problem.
Actually, it's your problem.
Ginty and Pug knew that voice. It was a voice that they both feared. It was the voice of their manager. Sir. So nice to see you again. What brings you here?
It's actually a funny story, Hinty. For the last several days, I was trapped in my office dealing with complaints about delays around the dockyards. And early this morning, as I go to investigate, Rosie tells me a very fascinating story about how two of my so-called best shunters were just lazing about while she was doing all of your work.
But wait, sir. She's lying. We've been working our wheels off and...
Oh, really? Because I've been watching Rosie. She's been at the water tower almost 5 times a day to refill her tank. Haven't seen you two hard workers there once.
Ginty and Pug just looked at their buffers in shame. Neither said anything for a long time. Thanks, Rosie. So you're a tattletale and a murderer.
Silence. I expect better of my engines. And so did Barry. Do you think he'd want to see two of his dearest friends acting like spoiled children or acting so horrid to the only one trying to keep things in order around here?
No, sir.
I should say not. You'll have plenty of time to think about that while you're doing Rosie's jobs as well as your own. For 2 weeks.
2 weeks? Sir?
No buts. You two need to start pulling your weight around here. Otherwise, I might see if the scrapyards are looking for a pair of lazy tank engines.
That did the trick. Frightened, Ginty and Pug scurried back to work.
Sir, you wouldn't really scrap Ginty and Pug, would you?
Of course not, but they don't need to know that. As for you, Rosie, I believe you've earned a long rest for all of your hard work.
Thank you, sir.
But, in 2 weeks, I want to see my best shunter back at work. Somebody has to keep these yards in order.
With that, Rosie's heart swelled with joy again, as she rolled into the shed for a well-deserved rest. And so, for the next 2 weeks, Ginty and Pug worked harder than they have ever done before. They did their best, but it was too much for them. They were relieved when Rosie came back to work, but they did their best to avoid her. They weren't cross with her anymore, but they were afraid. Before long, the docks were back in order, and things were peaceful in the yard again. For the most part. A few years later, a stout gentleman came to see the engines. He was, of course, Sir Topham Hatt, but none of the engines realized this. He turned impressively to Rosie. Your manager spoke highly of you, Rosie. How would you like to come work on my railway on the island of Sodor?
Sodor? Is Thomas still there, sir?
Indeed he is.
Rosie was so excited her safety valve nearly burst.
Well, good for you, Rosie. I think you'll do pretty well on Sodor. And if you ever want to come back, we'd be really...
But Rosie had already left. She didn't stop to say goodbye. She just raced off to her new life on Sodor and never looked back.
From that day on, Rosie was repainted lavender and became a valuable part of the Sodor Railway. Her hard work and chipper attitude made her very popular, and she is happiest of all whenever she sees Thomas. Though sometimes her affection is too much for the blue tank engine.
And that's my story. Did you like it?
Yes, indeed. It was even better than the first time you told me. Indeed, but don't you regret not saying goodbye to Ginty and Pug?
Nope. The only thing I really regret is not asking for a different paint job. I like lavender, but I'd rather like something new.
Well, maybe it's time you advocated yourself again.
With that, Henry said goodbye to Rosie and Bruno and happily made his way home. As he left, Rosie pondered to herself. Later that day, Henry and James were at the junction. James was boasting about how he got to pull Henry's express.
It's only fitting that a splendid red engine should take the express, and to have the most famous red engine of Sodor is even more fitting.
Henry just rolled his eyes, wishing he could be literally anywhere else, when a familiar whistle rang out, and entering the yard was a very different-looking Rosie. Her lavender paint was gone, and in its place was a deep red coat with gray lining, the letters NWR on her boiler, and a large 37 on her cab. Henry smiled knowingly at Rosie's new coat. James just stared in disbelief.
Rosie! You're red!
Yes, I've been repainted, James. What do you think?
I think you're trying to be like me!
If you say so, James.
With a confident smirk, Rosie puffed cheerfully away.
Who does she think he is? Trying to copy me? I don't know, James. I think red looks better on her than it ever did on you.
All James could do was grumble and watch as Henry chortled away.
That break a friend flipper up to put a loom of